What's going on, guys? It's your boy Nick, and we're here at BlendIn Coffee Club, where we're going to talk about the espresso basics today. Before we start with that, it's WeeklyDrip 49. So if you haven't seen the last video that we released earlier this week, we mentioned the discount code that we're using for our Nile to get 20% off a bag. Just use the code Stay Home, because you gotta stay home, guys. You gotta be safe out there, right? That's why we're making these videos. So to mention with the espresso machine, we asked on Instagram about what you guys prefer on espresso, and that has I think we mentioned the Bukisa and the Doratu. So today we're going to be dialing in the Bukisa. So with the equipment that we're using, this is our Lynn Weber machine. It's a zero retention grinder, and we also have the Sanremo Opera 1v2. So let's get started, right? So right now I have the Bukisa down here. Before we actually pull the shot, a lot of people, you guys have mentioned ratio. So generally, I know a lot of you guys have different espresso baskets, so we want to make sure that we maintain the espresso at a 1-to-2 ratio. So whatever your dose of coffee that you put in ground, you want at least around the double the amount as your end coffee beverage, right? So right now I have 18.2. I'm going to leave a little bit just for room. And while we are doing this, for you guys that do have hoppers out there, a lot of people have that option where it's actually, I guess, compresses the coffee before you actually take it out. And so as much as that is helpful, that actually just does enough to where it compacts those grounds so you don't have to tamp it. So that's something that you want to mention, that I wanted to mention about, mainly because what we have here, Erica, you can actually show her, we have a puck press. So it actually pushes at 24 pounds. So in reality, it's actually not that much. You want to make sure you just put enough pressure so that it has enough pressure to compress the grounds, not too much, not too, I guess, light. And with that, you'll achieve proper extraction. So with me, especially with you guys, when you are pulling maybe 1 or 2 shots at home, you want to make sure that the basket's nice and dry. A lot of people that have mentioned to me in the class that they always find that the basket's always wet, mainly because the boiler is heating up the puck, or the portafilter. So you want to make sure that's nice and dry before you put in the grounds. Mainly because when it comes into contact with water, you're actually already technically extracting the coffee from the grounds. 17.19, 18, cool. So you can look close. It's just enough to compress those grounds and make sure that it's nicely and evenly distributed. Cool. So while we're letting that pull, so right now we're actually watching the time and the weight. So this one was fairly coarse. We pulled it at 20.9 seconds, and it had a yield of 35 millimeters, so right around the range that we wanted to. Surprisingly not bad. You can still get that like astringency. When I mean astringent, you get like that kind of like sourness. It's like pungent. And a lot of people like to identify sourness as sweetness, but we like to keep those things separate. You can have a high amount of acidity, but you can also have a low amount of sweetness. The biggest thing that I like to relate that is like a candied fruit, If it's not like sweet, you'll most likely have like a very sour, or basically unripe, an overripe or underripe fruit. So I'm gonna fine it up just a little bit, see how it works. Just because with everyone at home, the biggest thing that we're gonna be focusing on is grind size, because that's the probably easiest variable that we can control. Cool, almost there. So I just went one notch over, so it's not a big jump, but it's enough to make a difference. So a lot of you guys actually with the Breville machines have a dial, and that dial goes in microns. So I would either go 1 or 2 steps. Smaller step, the smaller the adjustment. So if you find like you're close into the range, it's always nice to make that kind of adjustment, not a major drastic adjustment. So considering I find it up, I like to have a lot of people think about the grounds as like boulders versus rocks. I always mention that kind of analogy just because when you pour water over boulders, the water will flow through the cracks very easily. But if you flow it through sand, it's going to take a little bit longer just because the sand is easily soaks up that water, and it takes it longer for it actually to steep completely through. So if you visualize that in terms of grounds, the coarser you go, the faster the extraction time, the finer you go, the longer the extraction time. Also in terms of flavor, when you go finer, you're also taking advantage of the enzymatics that are already obtained in the coffee. So what that means is the finer that you go, typically the more acidity that you'll get out of the cup. Yeah, so like when you immediately change the ground size, I try and recommend people to purge 2 or 3 times just to make sure that you get a consistent ground within what you're actually pulling. Just because with a lot of grinders there are retention, so you'll have a lot of fines caught up in the chute, which kind of gives you an inconsistent dose in terms of what you're doing at home. Just because at home you're doing smaller doses, so there will be some changes that you'll need to make to adjust. So okay, kind of worked out. 22 seconds, a little bit finer. I would say that's a whole extra 1.5 seconds to extract the coffee. On top of that, the yield was very similar, 34. And you actually see kind of how it looks. Has a nice crema. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. This was actually at a fairly good date as well. So this is much better. With this, I definitely get like a sweetened, like a candied fruit. It's more like candied apple. You get like citrus too as well, like a tangerine almost. Not exactly like an orange. Caramel, very like brown sugar sweetness. If you have any more questions, you're more than welcome to comment down below. We're going to be posting this on our IGTV. But aside from that, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for sticking around.